Once you take on that leadership role, particularly when you're in a role of leading people, that shift from me to we is incredibly important, right? So continue to have your aspirations and your goals as a leader, but now you have this whole group that's in your charge that you're responsible for. And part of that responsibility includes helping them grow and learn and develop and be successful as they can be in their role.
Hi there, and welcome to Revive Your Life podcast. I want to introduce my guest today. Her name is Brandy Ferrer. She has been in the professional and leadership development sector for 20 years, so has a tremendous amount of knowledge. We're going to be having a conversation about how leadership lessons from the house of motherhood, so how these two intersect. And so she is both, and I think you'll find this a conversation very interesting. She's also the best-selling author of Spark: How Great Leaders Start, which would be a good idea to pick up if you're interested in leadership, and especially if you're female. And also upcoming Spark Your Leadership program that she is running starting March 26th. So I would go and check that out as well. Brandy is on a mission to support and grow confident, impactful leaders so they can operate at their best while elevating their teams and company. Enjoy. Welcome to Revive Your Life podcast, a space for women to rediscover their authentic selves amid the daily grind. You can join us here as we peel back the layers to have candid conversations about the challenges women face in their relationships, families, and workplaces. From rebuilding your confidence to uncovering your passion and setting boundaries that stick, we'll explore practical strategies for dynamic personal growth. All right. Welcome, everybody, to Revive Your Life podcast. I have Brandy with me today. And you all have heard a major introduction here for our guest. So I'm really excited to have her with us. And we're going to be talking today about leadership lessons from motherhood. So just to set that up right away, but I first want to welcome Brandy to the show and have her let us know a little bit about why she found this topic to be something she wanted to really dive into with me, because we're going to have a cool conversation.
Thanks so much for having me, Bianca. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So why did this topic resonate with you more like you were really excited about this? I was thought about it. You were like, yes, I think this would be wonderful to talk about. Why does this resonate with you so much?
Because it's such a natural place for us to learn leadership lessons. Motherhood is an experience that a lot of us go through, right? But it's not necessarily universal. And it's just ripe for learning and growth, so much of which can be applied professionally.
Right. I think that's the tie over that we're going to be talking about today, is that there isn't this distinct separation between our professional lives and our family lives that I think, keep your emotions, and your family life out, or, what's going on in your life outside these doors, because we're going to be objective here at work. We see what kind of dysfunction that creates, right?
Yes.
And I think that I'm excited too about blending this, especially for women, which this podcast is starting to aim towards helping women understand that actually they're natural blenders. Mm-hmm. They might be trying to separate church and state, so to speak. It's not really that easy for us. It would be better to, I think, accept the reality of how actually the roles that we play, and we play well, are informing these types of positions like leadership, yes, which are much more complicated, just like motherhood, yes, than coming in at a role of just being hired, or at a level that I think that we would say would be like more first step, second step, right?
Yeah.
So these are complex roles that absolutely inform each other. And I think women might be interested in hearing more about how they worked for you so far. So let's start with, I think you set it up in a way I really liked, which was like lesson 1, lesson 2, because that is my biggest thing too, Brandy, is I really think life is the great teacher. Mm-hmm. And if we could look at it as lessons, we don't miss anything. We actually are learning as we go, instead of, why does this keep happening to me?
Yeah.
So let's think about like your first lesson. What did you learn from motherhood and where you were in your professional life,
Yeah.
when you became a mother?
Yeah. So I first want to just comment about something that you said in the introduction, which is um, there's this, it's a little bit, it's considered an outdated idea now, but when I was coming up very early in my career, I experienced exactly what you were describing with that separating church and state kind of thing, right? With motherhood. And what ended up happening in my case was I was really great at work. I was climbing the corporate ladder. I was checking all the boxes, doing all the things. And I would come home and I would be exhausted and worthless, pretty much. Not emotionally available. Just all I wanted to do was crawl into bed and then do everything again the next day. So it's helpful to kind of go back and think about these lessons and share them, because the journey that I experienced is something that I think a lot of us are still experiencing even all of these years later. So the first lesson, I describe it as, it's not about me. So, prior to becoming a mother, I like to say that I was the star in my own movie. That was my life, right? I had these professional aspirations and I was doing all of the things and working the long hours and really hard charging, thinking about my own development and my own growth and my own career. I wasn't thinking about anybody else, right? I was just focused on myself. The moment that I found out that we were having a baby, that whole thing got turned upside down. All of a sudden, I can't get up at 3 a.m. and start my day anymore because the baby needs rest, right? I have to be mindful about what I'm eating. So from that very moment, my focus expanded to include these considerations and care for this, little unborn being. And she really became the heart of every single decision that I made. And that was a huge shift for me.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing in leadership, right? So once you take on that leadership role, particularly when you're in a role of leading people, that shift from me to we is incredibly important, right? So yes, continue to have your aspirations and your goals as a leader, but now you have this whole group that's in your charge that you're responsible for. And your part of that responsibility includes helping them grow and learn and develop and be as successful as they can be in their role.
And that tie over actually is again, like, what is for you? And maybe that is another thing too. Like, how do you get into a leadership role? Well, you go above and beyond. You are, I think, the desire to actually build something and accomplish something and achieve on the outside. Still, when we're young, we are wanting to like show, improve, and be and become. So I don't actually think that that's devoid of a real sense of self. I think we're developing ourselves still through the eyes of others, I like to say, through, the lens of work, and how we're recognized and through our boss and how that they, or feedback from our colleagues. So we're still in a formative stage where the, external world is definitely necessary. But if you're a high achiever, right, there can be, what I notice, especially with women too, is that this ability to like emotionally invest themselves fully in that, without necessarily, recognizing that, right, the baby, that I think the baby also helps you recognize something for themselves. I need to watch what I eat. I need to, go to bed on this, or actually take care of my circadian rhythm and my sleep. And it's not about this as much. And you say me, but I think this high achievement, it's actually incorporating more of me too in this process, because a woman becoming a mother definitely in psychological terms regresses back into their body, back into a state of to be in alignment with the baby, calm when she needs to sleep, and so on and so on. So there is a natural regression. So I think it's cool that we can get a certain place, but then at some point, once we've achieved a high enough level, there is a need to come back in.
Yeah.
Like we can't just, because if we stay here, now I'm just going to play the role of mother. Now I'm just going to play the role of leader. What happens? What do you, especially with the leadership part, what happens if somebody just goes in and doesn't actually deep dive back into themselves and reframe?
What I see a lot of is I see a lot of leaders that sort of start from that position, and there's this belief that's not accurate, but there's this belief that I have to follow this template, right? If I can follow this template, if I can check these 9 boxes and do these, 5 things, then I'm doing it. Then I'm leading. Like, look at me go. And that completely takes out authenticity. That takes out the ability to connect with the people that you work with in an effective way. And you're kind of like a shell of yourself. You're not bringing your fullest and best self to the table. And it's very hard to be able to bring out someone else's fullest and best self when you're kind of like, okay, I'm going to bring 75%. Yeah. So I think that leaders can be technically successful, but I think that in terms of relationships, it's very hard to do when leaders don't take the time to first, okay, let me look inward. I mean, something even as basic, Bianca, as I start by asking leaders, why do you want to be a leader? And then what is your leadership strength? And it's amazing to me, the sort of pre-programmed responses that come out of those conversations. So sometimes we don't even take the time leading up to that to really get clear on, I want to have this impact, or I just want to raise, because knowing that informs the kind of leader that you're going to be and the impact you're going to have.
Yeah. Answering the why.
Yes.
And I think that kind of falls into the next lesson is this about the change in the identity. And I get this too, with working with people is, I want to get married, or I want to have a baby, or I want to have kids. Well, maybe that's a natural tendency. I want to be a leader. I want to raise. I want promotion. I want to continue to grow. Okay, but then what are you stepping into? Not just the thing that you think might be the next step. That's what I really find people doing, is kind of blindly walking to what has been taught to them is next, and then getting all the way to the end of that and going, well, where did I go? Yeah. What about me? I left myself behind a long time ago, and actually this was really messy, or this was not what I intended. So in some ways too, I think, this is actually, I'm not sure if this is where it was, but the things that, I think that make us, it's not that we have to have everything drawn out, but the story that you told about the plan, like the plan for having the baby, like, I think that would be a great story to go into, because I think that was like, you put some effort into trying to define yourself as a mother from the beginning. And and I think that was an interesting attempt. We can add in more to it, but what was that you did?
Yes. So when I was pregnant, I did all of the things that I knew how to do to prepare myself. Like, I did all the reading, I listened to the podcasts, I did all the birthing class, I like everything that I could think of to prepare myself. And I created, like all the books say, well, have a birthing plan. So I painstakingly developed this birthing plan, and it laid everything out from what music's to be playing, who's to be in the room, like every single thing that you can imagine. And I was like, look at me, I'm prepared. I have all my stuff. And I'm pretty much throwing this birthing plan at anybody who came into the delivery room.
Right.
And very quickly, when things kind of went off the rails a little bit and didn't go perfectly and according to plan, that birthing plan really meant nothing. And I think that speaks a lot to kind of what you were describing about what are we stepping into, right? And then what are we leaving behind? So I was stepping in this role and I was like, okay, I'm prepared. I'm ready. I have all the answers. Essentially, I did my homework, right? Like,
yeah,
I might as well have been shouting to everybody, like, look at me. I'm going to be a great mom because I did my homework. But it didn't really matter. And I had to be able to adapt in those moments. I wasn't going to have all of the answers. I couldn't plan for all of the variables, right? You can't plan for perfection as a parent. And I think that's true as a leader as well. So, we talk a lot with the leaders we work with about flexibility and adaptability because, you could have the best laid plans. Like I have the strategic plan and our marketing vision and everything's just right dress. And then something like COVID happens or your top salesperson leaves or, whatever that case may be. And now we're scrambling to kind of figure it out. So that was really that lesson is you can't plan for perfection. Be open to adaptability and flexibility, of course, but to that learning, right? So what are you stepping into? And then what are you leaving behind? Yeah. And I think that's a really important part that goes along with the identity, right? So whether it's motherhood or whether it's leadership, step into this new role. It's not necessarily that you're adding more. You got to take some stuff away too, right? Like your focus changes a lot. And that's a really important piece. So often with leaders, especially new leaders, we see like, oh my gosh, Brandy, I've been in this role for 3 months. I'm already burned out. Like, okay, well, talk to me about what's happening. Well, I'm doing this, and this, all of the technical stuff that they were doing before. And now I'm also monitoring performance and, keeping things on track for deadlines and, all of that kind of stuff. Like, okay, this is where we talk about what can you let go so that you can be successful at that next level.
And I think that and that's what are you leaving behind, right? And what are you being able to refocus on? Because we can't keep taking the entire thing with us. And I think with this idea too, what humans do, whether, women or men, I do think is cling to planning because there is something about controlling the future because it's a bit of a defense, even though I think it's important to be organized and plan and think things through. That's not the way we're using it in all cases. Everything is multi-determined. So sometimes a certain way we can use planning is to protect us from uncertainty. But the uncertainty needs to be accepted so that the person that you are, the capable, the adaptive, the flexible, the open person that you are can actually come through and be there for you during that time. I think if we lean too much on the plan and look, I'm great, or look, I've done it according to plan with business or motherhood, we end up only then deferring to when things don't go right, instead of that adaptive part coming through, a disappointed part, an anxious part, mad, sad.
Yeah.
I'm like, wait, this is all just an act within that play, instead of putting that down, recognizing its function, but also incorporating, like you said, like your focus needs to be able to shift confidently into another like gear within yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah. Be committed to the goal or to the outcome, and then be adaptable on the plan.
There you go. Yeah. And especially in parenthood.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I was just talking to somebody today for a second. I said, you're going to have kids. Oh yeah. I definitely want them. It's been a while, but I said, it's one of the things that I found though, is that you have this idea of what it's going to be like in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's what leads you towards it. Mm-hmm. But then there is like to recognize that it's not all, it's like, it's so much more than that. It's not, what is it going to give you that fills a space for you? It's actually what this entire landscape of very rich experiences that either you're going to learn and grow from, or this is going to be really challenging. I promise you.
Yeah. I love that you said that. That made me think about, early on, I was the mother who said, my kid is not going to have McDonald's. She's not going to have screen time. I'm going to be that kind of parent. And then reality sets in. And first of all, that's not realistic. And second of all, you're right. It's so much more than that. Mm-hmm. And to be focused on your kid eating a chicken nugget versus like we're having this amazing time together, it's missing the point.
Right. It is missing the point. And I think that that's something that I want to discuss with leadership. Mm-hmm. That seems to be like, I think in parenting, we start to really relish like the times that are good mm-hmm. with our children. And we are seeing that those are what we really miss as they get older, that real special bonding time and this and that. So I think that we are able to see in because we have a closeness. But I also find that, well, at least my experiences, I've heard about, leadership being really difficult for people sometimes to trust others or lean into relationship that feels like it's collaborative, mm-hmm. And where you're kind of moving towards like the point of where it is that like not your responsibility just to be the mother that does the right thing, like not, no chicken nuggets and no this and no that, right? Mm-hmm. But that's protective. There's a function of being in relationship with that, but that doesn't seem to be like, again, like there's something more to this that where it starts to broach into this interpersonal relationship thing where it's easy. I think it's easier for us to appreciate with our children. Sometimes some mothers, absolutely more pay attention to how your grades. Yeah. Are you being me? Like, are you attending to the things that are important to me?
Yeah.
Which, has its consequences. So that's how I'm kind of setting up this idea that I'm thinking about in my head is like, does a leader do the same thing? In some ways. Yeah.
Yeah. So like I have like 12 things I want to say to that.
Cool.
So I think in both leadership and parenthood, success doesn't mean that you're going to turn out the way that I turned out, right? Or mm-hmm. success from a mother's perspective, success doesn't mean when you leave this house at 18, you're going to college and you're going to be a doctor, right? You're going to make a bunch of money. Success means, okay, I've done my part as a parent to make sure that you were healthy and taken care of, and you can make good decisions and you have good judgment. You now have all the tools you need to be a successful adult. Success then is defined by you after that. Mm-hmm. And it's similar in leadership because not everyone's idea of success looks the same, right? One of the common pitfalls we see with new leaders is, okay, well, I'm in this leadership role. I must have done something right to earn this promotion. Mm-hmm. I'm obviously a technical expert. Thereby, my job is everyone needs to do it the way that I have done it. And that's where we see a lot of micromanaging behaviors, a lot of really kind of holding on to the status quo and those kinds of things. So I think in both cases, it behooves leaders to step back and ask the question to their team, what does success look like for you? And if you have 10 different people on your team, you're going to have 10 different responses. Just like if you have 4 kids, you're going to have, it's going to be different with each one of your kids. That interpersonal point that you made about leadership, like so much of what a leader does, what an effective leader does, is to continuously strengthen and hone those relationships, because that's where you get the influence, right? And that's where you build the trust. You don't build the trust because, well, yesterday I was your coworker and today I'm your manager, so you just got to do what I say now. Like, that's not how it works. And so often leaders are dealing with, even though we don't talk about it a lot, so often leaders are dealing with very human emotions. They're dealing with fear, anxiety, like, I don't really know what I'm doing. Leadership is not, there's not an SOP. There's not, and that's where your secret sauce or your stuff that's unique to you comes in. But we don't really get that message a lot. A lot of us don't get that message. So we don't bring that part. And so so much of the issues with trust and communication breakdowns oftentimes are related to something is going on with that leader. They're feeling inadequate or insecure or uncertain or fearful. And that's projecting through in their behaviors and impacting their relationships.
Yeah. And I mean, to start from there, that's the same with motherhood too. When you set yourself up with this idea that I know how I was successful at doing it this way, and now and I see the problems that I even starting to add in, oh, my parents didn't do this right, so I'm going to absolutely do it opposite, which unfortunately leads to the same like very similar consequences. Opposites lead to the same end result. But if you mix all this together where there's just all of this planning around, well, I know how because, and this is the way I'm going to be, there is this rigidity and bossiness that can come through that definitely isn't paying attention to, the nuances of something like, it's not a nuance. Actually, it's really important. Somebody's definition of success.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't need to be 2 years of discovery talking.
Yeah.
It can be a pretty simple conversation. It's just, people aren't taking the time to slow down and go in enough for that to be explored. And then that information utilized to come up with a better plan. That again, there's a big difference between a boss and a leader. Like, I think that there's like a saying about a dad and a father or mom, and like that there's this nurturing aspect to these roles that shows interest in the other person that then takes on a whole nother level of cooperation, of collaboration, of experience that is completely being left on the table.
Yeah.
In order to, again, like, I'm going to do it this way. And maybe there are some insecurities, whatever is going on inside that leader or that mom, that says, I can't get on your level. Otherwise I lose my sense of self.
Yeah.
Right. So I think coaching, and this is another, just like really quickly though, coaching with yourself, therapy for mother, whatever it is, to be able to do that inner work sometimes needs to happen. I think people also feel like, that this is just what they're supposed to know how to do. And the self-investment isn't there. We talked about this a little bit before, like, oh, I'll go and, read a book about motherhood or take a leadership course, but I don't know anything about me, like, or really deeply about myself.
Right.
So that's what and with that, how do you think this is actually, I feel like leadership development is coming into a new era in your niche, especially like is it more about interpersonal for you now? Is that what people are starting to recognize?
100%, 100%. The way, in terms of leadership development, at broad stroke, the way that we were developing leaders 20 years ago, 5 years ago, doesn't work, right? Because it's like, I think of like an assembly line. Oh, everybody goes through the same classes and gets the same, training, or everybody gets a mentor or whatever. Sure. And that fundamental knowing, like you talked about, that fundamental self-awareness. The very first thing that we teach leaders is self-awareness, because how can you not only navigate your role as a leader, your role as a mother, your role in life without this self-awareness? And it's interesting, Bianca, because it shows up in like weird ways. It shows up in like finger pointing, and it's your fault, and it's because that self-awareness piece is underdeveloped. And so what we see a lot is, like you were describing, well, this is my way. I'm the manager, or I'm the leader. So just come over to my way of doing things and everything is going to be good. When in reality, it's really about meeting people where they're at. But how can you meet people where they're at when you don't even know where you're at?
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I think there is some compassion in this, and some, I get it. If you don't know where you're at, I think it is hard. It's like all of a sudden somebody says, well, I don't really know. I mean, I've seen that blank look in their eyes, like, yeah, I haven't built that bridge yet. Right. It's okay, because it's underdeveloped, because what you were focusing on was developing all of these other aspects of your work, of your life, of all this. And that's great. Obviously that's developed. Now you're in a leadership role. Yeah. You are a mother, now let's do the personal work, because you don't need to live in survival mode either.
Right. Yes.
For the rest of your life, which kind of is what I would say, like, is a lot of a motivation for some of this upper movement or establishing yourself in a family.
Yeah.
That okay, take the foot off the pedal. We have to be able to pause or slow down a little bit in order to acquire these skills. But then there is this misnomer, well, I find that like developmentally behind. I'm like, no, it's not like that. You're not learning from age 5 to 15. It's going to take 10 years. Right. So this self-awareness is not, it can be learned. The basis of it can be learned. And then it's a lifelong process.
Yes, absolutely.
Right? Because new situations arouse different types of, configurations in your own mind as far as behaviors, motivations, emotional reactions. And this is where the adaptability comes in. But at least if you have a framework for knowing yourself.
Right.
Exactly. That little child doesn't knock you off your feet and turn you into your mom. Or the finger pointing, like you said, like starts to happen. And you're like, wait a second, that becomes really dysfunctional and makes a pretty big mess.
Yes.
At work. I guess that's the thing, is I don't know how people think that they're not in an organizational dynamic playing the role that they've always played. Mm-hmm. And like, is it a supporting role? Is it a codependent role? Is it the micromanaging role? Is it, whatever it is, or the fixer?
Okay.
That is probably who they were for their family.
Yeah.
Right. So this kind of segues into one of these questions that I had for you, which is thinking about that role that you play in the family as a mother and as a nurturer. Mm-hmm. Right. I wonder about women in leadership positions becoming like, the nurturer, the parts of or a high managerial position, mm-hmm. where the CEO is, a little off to the boss race, and she's second in command. Some sort of scenario starts to look a lot like home, and then everybody's coming to her for their complaints about what's going on. So this is where I'm wondering if this is the kind of the mothering aspect of a woman is of benefit, or what the consequences of being a woman in a leadership role, knowing that transference, which is a bit of a clinical word, is going to be motherly, mm-hmm. to a certain extent.
Yeah. So I think some of those things, like the nurturing, is actually a really great leadership trait, mm-hmm. because, one of the things that I think effective, successful leaders do is they're bringing up the next generation of leaders.
Right.
And they're teaching good habits, and they're, sort of paving that way. Mm-hmm. And that requires some degree of nurturing, right? That requires having meaningful one-on-one conversations, and let's work on your professional development plan together. And hey, I see you on Zoom and you don't seem like yourself today. Is everything okay? That's a necessary attribute. I think where it can go to the basement, if you will, or the dark side is, or overextension of that is being the person, right? So this is where that empowering comes in. This is what great leaders do too. So I see, Bianca, you come to me, this is the third time that you're venting about this situation. So let's talk about how do we solve this, and let's talk about what steps you can take, and then report back to me on those steps. And really shifting that ownership and responsibility. You're still collaborating, you're still getting that support, but now you're also empowering. Like you don't have to vent to me, or you don't have to come to me to solve this. Like, let me help you do this for yourself. Like I said, like maybe a nurturing teacher. Yeah, exactly. I love that.
Right. The nurturing part means you're nurturing the relationship. You're seeing you're seeing the people that you're working with. And same with children, that you can notice something and then see if they have some ideas about what it is,
right,
and empower them to, because maybe their solution is different from yours.
Yeah.
You can give them a couple, but, really it's ultimately, have I empowered you with the skills or with the learning or with whatever it is, the structure. It's almost like a cognitive structure, a way of thinking that will help you build your bridge out of this hole that you're in with this person. Yeah. Or let me know. I think that makes a lot of sense, because the other part is that dark side, which I actually like that word, because when somebody says, I'm the fixer, that's really, that can lead to that in and of itself has a kind of aggressive quality to it. And for women too. And I mean, it's like, I'm the one who does it best. I'm the one who's going to rescue. I'm the one who's the hero. And now I start to see this as, some sort of maybe compensation, like a character formation or something like that, of compensating for something that they didn't have in childhood. But this is going to break you.
Yeah.
I mean, that tends to, being the fixer in a leadership role is definitely detrimental. There's nothing positive.
Well, and one thing I'll add to that is this question of, where am I getting my value, right? So if I feel like I'm bringing value by being the fixer, and that's worked for me in the past, then that's what I'm going to continue to go back to. So I think that's one of the things that we ask leaders a lot too is, where's your value? Where do you feel like your value is?
Right. And if they think it's only in this place, it's just going to keep on getting pumped up and pumped up and pumped. And the more that you think that and allow that, the more people think that that's what you want from them to do.
Yeah, that becomes their identity. Yeah.
Yeah. So it is about recognizing that maybe this is a massive strong suit that instead of doing for everyone, you can help others learn at their own rate, and that you save this as your own superpower instead of blowing it up to always be able to give it away.
Right.
So that actually lends itself to the next question, which is something I think is along the similar vein, but I don't want to put it in a way that is making anybody feel like that this is something that is derogatory, is like something, but because I think it's actually societal and somewhat conditioned, but how a woman has come into her freedom and her power over time. I mean, even my grandmother couldn't vote. So it's been a pretty rapid progression, but along that way, there's been a stacking of roles and responsibilities for a woman. That when we talk about what's the focus, leave something behind. Well, women now are playing all of these, and so I'm wondering for you, because you're somebody who did, achieve a certain status before your motherhood and then brought this on to that. And that's exactly how that generally happens.
Yeah.
Well, so yeah, do you get what I'm trying to say there? Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll share some of the things that worked for me personally. So, in terms of leaving stuff behind, that was a hard lesson to learn.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the nature of things, right? It's a weird analogy, but it's like a snake shedding its skin, right? In order to grow, you have to get rid of that skin. And so, after a lot of stress and migraines and health issues and all kinds of stuff, I'm like, okay, this isn't working. I am very fortunate in that I am married to a partner who is a genuine partner. So at different points in our journey together, we've come together and said, okay, like, I'm not cooking anymore. I'm leaving that behind. We're constantly shifting our, what's the word I'm looking for? The household labor stuff.
Yeah.
We're constantly having these conversations about what's next. And that is such a freedom, because not only does it allow you to kind of shed that skin, but it also frees you of like, okay, I don't have to separate. I don't have to be this way at home and then be this way at work, which, by the way, is freaking exhausting. And it's not a sustainable way to be.
You want to be one person. And you're saying, like, in this case, when things started to get more intense and there were physiological symptoms, like migraines, and like, that's when you notice, and that's when people do notice, when the pain becomes pretty strong and the inner conflict is there.
Yes.
At that point, you got to know you're probably taking on too many roles and responsibilities and obligations.
Yes.
And something's got to give. And so in this case, and that's why it's so important to have a partner that meets you halfway. Ladies out there,
yes.
Men out there, whatever, it's so important, because otherwise I think that it just starts to fall. Like, if things aren't getting taken care of, then people are left like, well, then who's going to do it?
Right.
But in this case, I think, but I do think it's about communicating. A lot of people miss this.
Yes.
They're like, oh, well, he doesn't help out. I said, well, have you talked to him about it? Oh, well, he just tells me, yeah. Or, it's never a really effective decision to do instead of communicate.
Right.
Is almost easier, even though it's harder in the end.
Mm-hmm.
So you made decisions to, like, say something to him. How did you overcome any sort of resistance to, like, putting this on his plate, or how is he going to react?
It was kind of like, first of all, he could see, right? Like,
you see that you're stressed.
I can see that you're stressed, and it's affecting our relationship. It's affecting our family. We're partners. Like I said, he's so great. We're partners. So you need to communicate. You need to communicate with me and let me know. I don't know when to pick up the dry cleaning. I don't know what our daughter's schedule is all the time. I need you to say the words to me. And honestly, like, once we kind of got to that point in our relationship, it just made things so much easier. I think that way of being that you were describing, where you don't communicate, you say, oh yeah, my partner doesn't do anything, but you're not communicating. What ends up happening, I think, is that people begin to feel, it's very easy to feel resentful.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to feel that way.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's very easy, but I think what you just said, again, this is what maybe there's not a bridge, so it feels scary. And maybe there's a way of learning about how to communicate before you start. But your husband saying that to you was exactly what I say to people too, is that they cannot assume your needs.
yes,
They cannot read your mind, and it's not their job to.
right.
It's, maybe, again, this is because your needs were never assumed, that you're really hoping that people will be able to come along and, aren't I the great leader? Come along with me on this. And, can't you see that I need you? And you'll just assume I need, like I do for everyone else. Women are great at this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But that doesn't mean everybody else is.
Right.
So it's okay that we need to be able to step out of our comfort zone and develop the skill to say something. It's not rocket science. It's common sense.
Right.
And once that happens, there is this ease.
Yes.
That starts to have like, oh, I can rely on you. Man, just that psychologically and emotionally, I got to keep going back because a leader and as a mother or a spouse, that's huge because adulthood is about being able to take on more responsibility.
Yes. Yeah.
But not in a vacuum and not in a chaotic way.
Right.
Yeah.
And that communication piece,
mm-hmm.
I mean, we were talking about it in regards to, a personal relationship. It is every bit as important in a working relationship as well. And it's this for all of the same reasons. The assumed needs, the bias we have, there's all kinds of different things, but we do the exact same thing at work. Well, it's easier to not say anything and assume Bianca would respond this way or assume she needs this or wants this.
Mm-hmm.
It's the exact same thing.
Yeah. And fresh perspectives. I notice when people get talking, they start to see things in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
And boom, I'm like, okay, well, there's that adaptable side. So the more that you practice communicating or the more that you initiate communication, I think the more comfortable we are with really our own inner landscape to be present, to be centered, to be balanced, to be able to respond. So, and that, ultimately, I think we've kind of gotten there. We've gotten to where we were going to be here with this is at the deepest place, it is about us feeling centered and feeling like we have our hands on our wheel and that we're able to enjoy our lives, enjoy our relationships, actually really feel good about our work. Mm-hmm. It's not about this pain of running around with our head cut off thing. And are we the best mom? Did we pick up enough people and, from soccer today? Should I bring the cupcake? Like all these things we're just looking for when really we start to really get down to it. It's about this experience we're having within and how how we're participating in what we're doing in our lives. And that's the alignment I think we're all really going for.
Yeah. Yeah. Who doesn't want to feel good about their work?
And so much I see this as a play of still, whatever it is that I'm lacking, I'm still playing this out here. So I'm really hopeful for the future that, motherhood, leadership, fatherhood, whatever role we're going to play, even if we put on the hero hat every once in a while, we understand what that is to the link that it needs to go.
Yeah.
And be able to bring it all back in. So, well, now I want to ask, so thank you for being here. And if you have and you want to tell us anything about what you're doing and how you're continue to spread this amazing message too.
Yes, absolutely. So we are getting ready to actually launch a program that encapsulates a lot of what we've been talking about today in terms of self-awareness and identity and really moving into a leadership role with confidence and comfort and feeling good about that. That program, it's called Spark. It's called Spark Your Leadership.
Spark Your Leadership. Okay.
And registration's open now.
Where would somebody sign up?
Yep. So let me just look really quick because I had my website up. So somebody could get more information and register at pathfinder-strategies.com/spark-your-leadership-program.
Got it. But Spark is the book that you wrote, and that is where you can find your name and that book. And I'm sure that people be able to find it on your website too.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, I think that this is the thing is that if people start to recognize that this is totally doable and not something that we are going to, that is so far off in the distance that a lot of us have a pretty strong grip on this and have a scaffolding to build your grip on it, then come on in. I mean, that's the whole point. And a program like yours would obviously then complement both a professional and personal life too. So I really appreciate you having you on. And I will put the link for the event and the workshop in my podcast notes and all of that good stuff. So anybody listening can find that easily. Okay.
Wonderful. Appreciate it so much, Bianca.
Absolutely. So thank you again. And we will talk again, I'm quite sure.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks so much. Take good care.
All right. Bye-bye. Thanks for joining us on another thought-provoking episode of Revive Your Life podcast. I hope the topics we explored were inspiring and offered you a few fresh perspectives. I'd like you to make sure to visit biancagrace.com, where you can sign up for my newsletter to hear more about upcoming workshops, retreats, and the next podcast. Let's continue this empowering journey together. See you over there.